I couldn't believe the words that came out of Mom's mouth. "You're nothing but a cash cow," she said like it was some kind of joke. My hands were still shaking from paying for every flight, every hotel, every meal on our family vacation. I had worked extra hours, skipped my own plans, and made sure everyone else was happy, and this was the thanks I got. Betrayal hit me like a punch to the chest. I was frustrated, exhausted, and hurt, but deep down a spark lit inside me, a spark that said, I won't let this slide. I had been carrying this invisible burden for years and no one even noticed. From the moment I started earning, it became my responsibility to make sure the family never lacked anything. Groceries, bills, birthdays, vacations, I covered it all. Every time I got my paycheck, it felt like a countdown to how much of it would disappear before I even had a chance to spend it on myself. I thought I was helping, I thought I was supporting the people I loved, but slowly it became something else. It wasn't just the money. It was the constant pressure, the quiet expectation that I would handle everything, and the guilt if I ever hesitated. I missed out on things I wanted, things I deserved. Friends, trips, little luxuries, even small personal treats. I pushed them aside, telling myself it was for the family. I convinced myself that their happiness was worth more than mine. And yet no one seemed to care. No one noticed the extra hours I worked, the late nights balancing bills and planning trips. I wasn't just paying for things. I was carrying the emotional weight of everyone else's comfort. I was the one who made sure everything ran smoothly while everyone else relaxed. The invisible burden became heavier with every holiday, every special occasion, every little favor I quietly handled. Then came the vacation. I had saved, planned, and made sure everything was perfect. I handled every detail, every payment, every itinerary, making sure everyone else could enjoy themselves without a worry. And yet, the moment I tried to relax, the moment I allowed myself to hope for a little gratitude, the words hit me like a thunderbolt. You're nothing but a cash cow. All those years of sacrifice, all the late nights, all the money I spent, reduced to a single insult. In that moment, the invisible burden became visible, pressing down harder than ever. I realized I had been taken for granted, my efforts overlooked, my generosity mistaken for weakness. But even as the sting of betrayal burned, a small voice inside me whispered that maybe this was the turning point, that maybe finally I would stop being invisible and start standing up for myself. The vacation was supposed to be a celebration, a time for family to relax and make memories. I had spent weeks planning it, meticulously booking flights, hotels, and excursions, making sure everyone would have the best experience possible. I had even upgraded rooms and chosen activities I knew everyone would enjoy, all without a single complaint from me about the cost. I thought this would be a moment of joy, a reward for all the work I had put in over the years. But as soon as we arrived, I started to feel the familiar pattern creeping in, the pattern of entitlement. My siblings complained about everything: the food, the schedule, the temperature in the hotel room. Mom had her own list of demands, each one more unreasonable than the last. And yet, I quietly handled every complaint, every request, making sure to smooth over the irritation and keep the trip perfect. I reminded myself that this was what family was about, that their happiness was worth my discomfort. Everything came to a head during dinner on the second night. I was quietly covering the bill for the entire restaurant as I had done countless times before, when Mom, looking right at me, dropped the bomb. "You're nothing but a cash cow," she said, her voice sharp, almost proud. I froze. I couldn't believe she would say this after everything I had done, everything I had sacrificed. Every flight, every hotel, every meal I had paid for, every inconvenience I had tolerated, it all felt meaningless in that moment. The words sliced through me, leaving a sting far worse than any financial strain could ever cause. I wanted to explode, to shout, to make her understand the countless hours and sleepless nights I had spent making life easier for everyone else. But instead I stayed silent, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. I realized then that this trip wasn't just a vacation. It had become a mirror, reflecting exactly how little my family appreciated my efforts. Every smile I had bought, every moment of comfort I had provided, had been taken for granted. That night, lying awake in my room, I replayed every memory of this vacation and countless others before it. I thought about the sacrifices I had made, the money I had spent, the time I had given, and the way I had been dismissed as nothing more than a wallet. My frustration grew into something stronger. A determination. I wasn't going to let this slide anymore. I realized that a vacation paid for by me had become a stage for my humiliation, and I silently promised myself that things would change. By the end of that first week, the vacation had become a turning point. The anger that had been building quietly for years erupted into clarity. I understood that this wasn't just about a single insult. It was about the pattern of exploitation, the years of being undervalued, and the need to reclaim control over my own life. I knew exactly what I needed to do next, not out of spite but out of self-respect. By the middle of the vacation, I felt like I was living someone else's life. I was there, physically present, but emotionally drained, carrying the weight of everyone else's comfort while my own needs were completely ignored. Every smile I forced, every polite word I offered felt heavier than the last. I had spent years giving, sacrificing, and supporting, and yet the one person I thought would appreciate it, my mom, had turned my efforts into an insult. When she called me a cash cow, it wasn't just a careless remark. It was a reflection of how little she saw me, how little anyone in the family really valued what I did. In that moment, the frustration I had been holding in for years finally boiled over. I realized I couldn't keep bending, giving, and paying while being treated like nothing more than a source of money. It wasn't easy to admit that I had reached my limit. For years, I had prided myself on being the reliable one, the one who made life smoother for everyone else. But reliability had turned into invisibility. My sacrifices had been taken for granted, and my kindness had been mistaken for weakness. The insult had cracked something inside me, but it also sparked a clarity I hadn't felt before. I began to see the patterns clearly. Every holiday I had funded, every birthday gift I had covered, every extra hour I had worked just to support the family, they had all been opportunities for me to be taken advantage of. And I had allowed it, thinking love and duty meant endless giving. But love doesn't mean losing yourself, and duty doesn't mean being disrespected. That night, lying awake while everyone else slept peacefully, I made a decision. I wouldn't let their entitlement define my life anymore. I couldn't erase the past and I couldn't change how they saw me, but I could control what happened next. I could reclaim my dignity, my boundaries, and my worth. The breaking point wasn't just anger. It was awakening. It was the moment I finally saw that my generosity didn't have to come at the cost of my self-respect. I knew then that the next step would be difficult. Standing up meant risk. Risk of conflict, of judgment, maybe even of rejection. But the alternative, continuing to be a cash cow for people who didn't care, was far worse. For the first time in years, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. I was ready. The morning after that night of sleepless reflection, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I realized that all my giving, all my sacrifices had to come with boundaries. I couldn't keep being everyone's provider, caretaker, and emotional buffer while being treated like I was worthless. It was time to take control, not out of anger but out of necessity. I started small. I stopped volunteering to cover extra costs automatically. When my siblings asked for money or extra perks, I paused. I learned to say no even when my heart screamed to help. The first time I said it, I felt guilty. But that guilt quickly faded when I remembered every year I had sacrificed for them without recognition. Saying no wasn't cruelty, it was self-respect. Then came the conversation with Mom. I chose my words carefully, letting her know how hurtful her words had been, and how the years of taking my generosity for granted had built up. I didn't yell or attack, I stayed calm but firm. I told her that I had supported the family willingly for years, but being called a cash cow crossed a line. For the first time, I set a clear boundary. I would no longer finance everything blindly, and I expected respect in return. It wasn't easy. Mom tried to guilt-trip me, my siblings complained, and the tension was palpable. But I held my ground. Every time I reinforced my boundaries, I felt a small weight lift off my shoulders. The anger that had simmered for years started transforming into empowerment. I was no longer invisible. I was no longer just a source of money or labor. I was a person with limits, a person who deserved appreciation, and a person capable of standing up for themselves. By the end of the trip, I had regained a sense of control I hadn't felt in a long time. I had learned that taking control didn't mean abandoning family or being selfish. It meant protecting myself, valuing my own contributions, and refusing to be taken for granted. I realized that my love and generosity could coexist with boundaries, and that setting limits didn't make me any less caring. It made me stronger. The aftermath of setting boundaries wasn't instant or easy. At first, my family was shocked. Mom seemed confused, as if she had never imagined I would stand up for myself. My siblings complained, pouted, and tried to guilt me, but I didn't back down. For the first time, they were forced to see that I wasn't just their endless source of money or labor. I was a person with feelings, limits, and self-respect. The tension was uncomfortable at first, but slowly things began to shift. They started realizing that their entitlement had consequences. My refusal to cover every cost, my insistence on being treated with respect, and my calm but firm words made them pause and reflect. I could see it in their eyes, the recognition that they had taken me for granted for far too long. More importantly, I felt lighter. The anger and frustration that had built up over years began to fade, replaced by confidence and clarity. I had learned a valuable lesson. Generosity doesn't mean endless sacrifice, and love doesn't require humiliation. By setting boundaries, I wasn't punishing anyone. I was reclaiming my dignity. By the end of the trip, a sense of balance had returned. I could still be there for my family, but now on my terms. The cash cow label no longer had power over me. What had begun as a vacation filled with resentment turned into a turning point. A moment of self-empowerment, reflection, and growth. I finally understood that respecting myself was the first step toward being respected by others. By the time the vacation ended, I felt like a different person. The anger, hurt, and frustration that had built up over years hadn't disappeared completely, but they had transformed into something stronger. Empowerment. For the first time in a long time, I realized I had the power to choose how I would be treated. I was no longer just the family's cash cow. I was a person who mattered, and I could finally put myself first without guilt. Returning home, I carried that sense of control with me. I continued to support my family, but on my terms. I made it clear that generosity came with respect, and I refused to let anyone take advantage of my kindness. The shift wasn't easy. Old patterns die hard, and there were moments of pushback and tension. But each time I held my ground, I felt a little freer, a little stronger, and more confident in my worth. I also realized that my self-respect didn't diminish my love for them. It enhanced it. By valuing myself, I could give from a place of choice rather than obligation. I no longer feared saying no or setting limits. I discovered that boundaries weren't walls. They were the foundation for healthier relationships and mutual respect. Looking back, being called a cash cow was painful, but it became the catalyst for change. What started as an insult became my awakening. I had learned to stand up, speak up, and protect my own happiness. I understood that life isn't about being taken for granted, and that saying no can be an act of love. Not just for myself, but even for the people I care about. Now I move through life differently. I am careful with my energy, mindful of my generosity, and unapologetic about my worth. I have gone from being invisible and exploited to being visible, empowered, and free. I finally feel like myself. Not someone else's source of money, not someone who sacrifices endlessly without recognition. I am no one's cash cow anymore. I am free, I am strong, and I am in control of my life.